She was 12 years old, 5 feet tall, and she was not going to cry. Not here. Not in front of him. Officer Darren Holt stood less than 3 feet away, arms crossed, a slow smile spreading across his face, the kind that had nothing to do with kindness. Around them, the Saturday afternoon crowd inside Sports Zone on Michigan Avenue had gone quiet. Shoppers stopped mid-reach. A mother pulled her son closer without knowing why. AMAYA Richardson didn't move. She didn't look at the floor. She looked directly at the man who had just told her in front of everyone that her mother couldn't possibly be who AMAYA said she was. What Officer Holt didn't know was that 48 hours from now, this moment would be watched by more than 2 million people, that his name would be searchable, that a 12-year-old girl from the south side of Chicago would become the face of something much larger than a disagreement in a sporting goods store. But right now, none of that existed yet. Right now, there was only a little girl standing her ground and a man who had no idea what was about to walk through that door. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you believe dignity is worth defending, hit subscribe, because this story is going to stay with you. The south side of Chicago did not forgive weakness. AMAYA Richardson had understood that long before she could put it into words. She had grown up in Bronzeville in a third-floor apartment on East 43rd Street, where the radiator knocked every winter night and the hallway smelled like someone else's dinner. It was not a bad life. It was just an honest one. She lived there with her grandmother, Cora Richardson, a woman of 63 who stood 5'2" and filled every room she entered. Cora had raised 2 children, buried 1 husband, survived a decade of double shifts at Rush University Medical Center, and still had dinner on the table by 6:30 every evening. She did not believe in excuses, and she absolutely did not believe in letting anyone make you feel small. Those values had passed to her daughter, Nicole, and Nicole had passed them without a single word to AMAYA. AMAYA was 12, but carried herself like someone who had already decided what kind of person she was going to be. She was lean and sharp-eyed with her mother's high cheekbones and her grandmother's stubborn jaw. Her natural hair was pulled into 2 puffs, and she wore a faded Chicago Bulls hoodie 1 size too big her mother's from before the 3rd deployment. It still smelled very faintly like Nicole's shea butter lotion. 9 months. That was how long her mother had been gone. AMAYA kept a paper calendar on her desk. Every morning she crossed out the previous day with a single red line. She marked the days the way a navigator marks distance, steadily without drama, confident that the destination existed even when she couldn't see it. Sergeant First Class Nicole Richardson was on her 3rd combat deployment with the 75th Ranger Regiment, 11 years of service, one of a small number of women who had fought through the assessment, the training pipeline, and the grinding institutional resistance that greeted anyone who didn't look like the soldiers who came before her. Iraq, Afghanistan, home twice with new scars and the same steady eyes. AMAYA knew all of this not because Nicole talked about it, but because AMAYA had listened to every word her mother had ever said and filled in the rest with research. She knew what a Ranger tab meant. She knew what a Silver Star was. She knew her mother had earned a Purple Heart 18 months ago and called it just a scratch, which AMAYA had never believed for a single second. She was proud of her mother the way some kids are proud of a sports team, completely irrationally with her whole chest, which was why when her best friend Jade brought it up that Saturday afternoon in Sports Zone, AMAYA didn't hesitate. The 3 of them had come with a specific mission. AMAYA had been saving for 6 weeks babysitting money, birthday money from Grandma Cora, $3 from a coat pocket. $47 total. She wanted to buy her mother a new pair of training shoes for when Nicole came home. Jade Watkins was 13 half a head taller with box braids and an opinion about everything. Tyler Moore was 12, quiet and careful, the kind of kid who observed before speaking. He was holding a basketball he had no intention of buying. "Okay, but what size does your mom wear?" Jade asked. 8.5, AMAYA said. "She likes ankle support. She runs 5 miles every morning, even deployed." Tyler looked up. 5 miles before breakfast. She says it clears her head. Jade. "Remind me what your mom does again." "Exactly." AMAYA picked up a gray and white New Balance trainer, turned it over. "She's Special Forces. 75th Ranger Regiment. Jade blinked. I thought that was like a man thing. It was, AMAYA said simply. She changed that. Tyler set the basketball down on the wrong shelf. So she goes on actual missions like in the movies. AMAYA allowed a small smile. She does things she can't tell me about. Better than the movies. Jade was quiet for a moment. Then, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. AMAYA checked both shoes were the same size and kept moving. She was not trying to be impressive. Her mother was Sergeant First Class Nicole Richardson. That was simply a fact, the same way the lake was always cold, and Grandma Cora's cornbread was the best in Bronzeville. She did not notice yet the man in uniform who had stopped browsing near the front of the store. She did not notice the way he turned slowly at the words 75th Ranger Regiment. For approximately 4 more minutes, everything was still fine. Officer Darren Holt had been on the force for 19 years. He was not a bad man exactly. He was something more complicated, a man who had calcified slowly around a wound he'd never properly treated until the scar tissue had become the shape of him. The wound had a date, September 14, 2004. That morning, a recruiting officer had handed 22-year-old Darren Holt a sheet of paper and told him his application to enlist had been denied. Cardiac arrhythmia, a small irregularity he'd never felt, never noticed. But it was there on the EKG, and the military did not accept undeniable. He sat in his car for 40 minutes. He never told anyone how long he sat there. He became a police officer instead and told himself it was the same thing. He said it often enough that most days he believed it. But somewhere underneath lived the knowledge that he'd been turned away, that the institution he'd wanted more than anything had looked at him and said not enough. Over 19 years without ever making a conscious decision, Holt had developed a reflexive need to question military claims. The psychology of a man guarding a door he'd once been refused entry through. He heard the word Ranger from across the store. He moved toward it the way water moves toward a drain. AMAYA had her back to him when he stopped close enough to hear. He listened to the girl talk about deployments, the regiment, the missions. He watched her friends look at her with something close to awe, and something in him that old, unexamined wound twisted. 75th Rangers. His voice was casual, almost friendly. AMAYA turned, saw the uniform, and straightened. Respectful, but not diminished. Yes, sir. Sergeant First Class Nicole Richardson, my mother. Holt nodded slowly. That's a special operations unit. Direct action. Combat deployment. You sure you got that right? Yes, sir. How old are you? 12. He repeated it the way adults repeat things when implying the speaker is too young to know what they're talking about. Listen, lots of women serve, do great work. Support roles, logistics, medical, important stuff. He paused. But Ranger Regiment combat roles, black women don't serve in that capacity, not in those roles. Maybe your mama does logistics, supply chain. Could be she works the base. A small lift of one shoulder. Maybe even laundry. He let the words sit there. Jade's mouth opened. Tyler looked at the floor. A woman 2 aisles over stopped moving. AMAYA did not flinch. She looked at Officer Holt with an expression that was not anger, something steadier than anger. Something built over 9 months of red lines on a calendar. My mother, she said with a precision unsettling in a 12-year-old, has been deployed 3 times. She has a Ranger tab, a Silver Star, and a Purple Heart. She is exactly who I said she is. Holt's smile settled in more comfortably, the smile of a man who believed the child was performing a script she'd memorized without understanding. Those are big words, he said. They're her words, AMAYA replied. I just remember them. By now, a loose perimeter of people had formed without anyone deciding to. A teenager had stopped pretending to look at shoes. An older man in a Cardinals cap had drifted closer. The music still played from overhead speakers, but the space around AMAYA and Holt had developed its own hush. Holt felt the audience and did not adjust. He was, in his estimation, doing nothing wrong, applying appropriate skepticism to an extraordinary claim. Look, I've been in this city 19 years. Kids hear things, mix things up, want to believe something that makes them feel good. There's nothing wrong with being proud of your mama, whatever she does. But special forces, he shook his head. That's not something you just claim without proof. AMAYA reached into her hoodie pocket and called her mother. It rang 4 times. Then voicemail. Holt spread his hand slightly, a gesture that said, "There you go." "See?" he said quietly. "Nothing." AMAYA lowered the phone. She did not look at the floor. She looked at a fixed point approximately 6 inches above Holt's left shoulder, the way her mother had once told her to look when someone was trying to make you feel small. Looking down tells them they won. Looking straight ahead tells them you're still here. AMAYA was still here. For now, that would have to be enough. The phone went back into her hoodie pocket. AMAYA's hand was steady when she did it. She made sure her fingers didn't tremble, because she understood that how you moved in moments like this mattered, that the body told its own story, that if her hand shook, Holt would file it away as confirmation of something she refused to confirm. Her hand did not shake, but her chest did a tight, private flutter behind her sternum. She had felt it before. It was not weakness. It was the physical consequence of caring deeply about something you could not immediately protect. She breathed through it. Marcus Webb had been watching all of this. Marcus was 34, the assistant manager of this sports zone for 3 years. He had come out from behind the back office when he heard the crowd thickening, not loud, just dense. He arrived in time to hear the word laundry and something in his jaw tighten. He considered intervening and ran the calculation quickly, the way black men in positions of professional authority learn to run calculations factoring in the badge, the audience, the unpredictability of a man already committed to a position. He decided to watch, to document. He reached into his shirt pocket, took out his phone, opened the camera-pressed record, held it low like a man reading a text message. The red dot blinked on. Holt had not noticed. He was focused on AMAYA, still convinced he was delivering a teachable moment. "Here's what I think happened," Holt said, his voice carrying the patience of condescension dressed up as reason. "Your mama told you something. Maybe she works on a base near a Ranger unit. Kids hear half a story and build the rest. That's not a criticism. That's just how it works when you're 12 and you miss somebody." The woman with the stroller made a sound, short and voluntary, and then AMAYA remembered. A Tuesday night in November, 14 months ago, 2:17 a.m. The ringtone cut through the dark, and she grabbed the phone before the second ring. The connection was bad. Her mother's voice quiet, quieter than a whisper. In the background, other voices in a language she didn't recognize. "Hey baby, mama, are you okay? I'm good. I've got about 4 minutes. I just wanted to hear your voice. Where are you? Somewhere cold tonight. Wasn't expecting that. How's school? It's fine. Math test on Friday. I studied. Good girl. Then I need you to do something for me. Whatever happens, however long this takes, I need you to hold it together. Not for me, for you, because you are the strongest thing I have ever made. And I need you to know that about yourself, even when I'm not there to tell you." "Yes, ma'am. You're my soldier at home, AMAYA. You hold the line." "I'll hold the line, Mama." She came back to the store, the lights, the music, the smell of new rubber, and looked at Officer Holt. "My mother," AMAYA said, her voice quiet and unhurried, "has been shot at in 3 countries so that people like you could stand in a store like this and do exactly what you're doing right now." The store went very still. "I'm not going to prove anything to you. I'm not going to beg you to believe me. She doesn't need me to defend her." A breath, steady. "But I want you to understand something, sir. Every single medal she has, she earned it. Every single morning she ran when she didn't have to. She ran it. Every single time she came home and didn't tell me what she'd been through, she did that to protect me. She has already proven everything, every single day, for 14 years. I don't need you to believe it. It is true whether you believe it or not." The man in the Cardinals cap exhaled slowly. The woman near the register put her hand over her mouth. Jade was staring at AMAYA with an expression she would later describe as the moment she understood what the word dignity actually meant. Holt was quiet for 3 seconds. Then his expression resettled. "Kids from neighborhoods like this," he said, voice flat and deliberate, "make up stories. It's not your fault. It's what happens when there aren't enough real role models around." The woman with the stroller said audibly, "Oh my God." Marcus glanced at his phone screen. In his distraction, his thumb had found the social share function on the store's staff app. 47 people are watching your live video. He looked up at the back of Holt's head. He did not stop recording. 47 became 93 in the time it took Marcus to process what was happening. He watched the number climb with detached fascination. 93 became 140. 140 became 212. Comments scrolled too fast to read. What is happening here? Is that a cop? Someone needs to say something. Share this. He kept the phone steady and did not say a word. AMAYA had not seen the screen. She was standing in the same spot she had occupied for the last several minutes, doing what her mother had taught her. Stay exactly where you are, and don't give anyone the satisfaction of watching you retreat. But something had shifted. Not in Holt. Holt had resettled into his position, like concrete finding its level. What had shifted was AMAYA herself. The speech had cost her something. Right things are not always free, and she could feel the specific exhaustion of having given something away she could not take back. She was not going to sit down. She was not going to let him see that. But she wanted to. It was Jade who moved first. Jade stepped forward and stood beside AMAYA. Not in front of her, not between her and Holt. Beside her, shoulder to shoulder. She said nothing. She simply stood there, box braids and a too bright puffer jacket, and made herself a presence. Tyler, after a moment that probably felt longer to him than it looked, moved to AMAYA's other side. AMAYA noticed. She did not look at either of them, but the set of her shoulders changed almost imperceptibly, the way a structure settles when a load is properly distributed. It was at this precise moment that Loretta Hayes looked up from the rack of athletic socks she'd been examining. Loretta was 61, a compact, deliberate woman with close-cropped silver hair and the posture of someone who'd spent 2 decades being told that posture was non-negotiable. She had retired from the United States Army 8 years ago at the rank of Master Sergeant after 22 years as a combat medical specialist. She had served in the Gulf, Kosovo, Iraq. She had heard everything. She'd been deciding whether to involve herself, weighing the badge, the audience, the unpredictability of a man committed to his position. Sometimes the most dignified response was to let a fool exhaust himself and move on. But then Holt had said kids from neighborhoods like this, and something in Loretta that had been still became no longer still. She folded the socks neatly over the rack's edge and walked toward the gathering with the unhurried stride of a woman who had walked toward difficult things her entire life. She stopped beside AMAYA, really looked at the girl, and saw a child holding herself together, with both hands and not letting it show. Loretta had done that herself in places far less forgiving than a sporting goods store. "Sweetheart," she said low and even, "can I see that photo, your lock screen?" AMAYA looked at the silver-haired stranger with the calm eyes and handed over the phone without a word. The lock screen showed Nicole Richardson in full dress uniform. The Ranger tab was clearly visible on her left shoulder. The ribbon rack was dense and ordered. Loretta studied it for 4 seconds. Then she handed the phone back and turned to face Holt. "That tab on her left shoulder," Loretta said. "You know what that is." "I know what a tab is." "Then you know what it costs. Ranger School has a completion rate under 40%. The women who have earned that tab went through the same mountains, the same swamps, the same 60-plus days of sleep deprivation as every man who ever wore it. Same standard, no exceptions." She paused. "This child's mother is wearing that tab in a formal military photograph. That is not something a 12-year-old invents." Another pause. "You called her daughter a liar in front of this entire store." "I didn't call anyone a liar. I asked for proof." "You said black women don't serve in that capacity." Loretta's voice did not change in volume or temperature. "I heard you. Everyone in this store heard you. I am a retired Master Sergeant, United States Army, 22 years of service. I have served alongside women in combat roles in 3 theaters of operation. We exist, officer. We have always existed. Your not knowing about us is your limitation. It is not our reality." The man in the Cardinals cap had uncrossed his arms. The woman near the register was now recording on her own phone. Marcus's live viewer count read 681. Holt was quiet. The comfortable architecture of his position had developed a visible structural problem. He understood the difference between a room that was with him and one that was not. This room was not with him. I was asking questions, he said finally. The paternal patience was gone. You were doing more than that, Loretta said simply, and I think you know it. Holt said nothing. AMAYA was looking at Loretta with something open and unguarded, the expression of someone who has been standing alone for a long time and has just felt unexpectedly a hand on their shoulder. Then Loretta reached into her jacket pocket and called a contact. It rang twice. Voicemail, a woman's voice, professional brief. You've reached SFC, Nicole Richardson. Leave a message. Loretta recognized the voice immediately. 8 years, but voices don't change the way faces do. She and Nicole had overlapped for 14 months at Fort Benning in 2009. She had watched a young staff sergeant named Richardson do things in training that made other soldiers stop and stare. She lowered the phone slowly. She turned to AMAYA and for the first time allowed a small, certain smile. Your mama is exactly who you said she is. I know her voice. I know her record. She trained at Benning when I was there. She was the kind of soldier that people remembered. AMAYA swallowed once. I know, she said. Her voice was very small, just for a moment. I know you know, Loretta said. I just wanted you to hear it from someone else. Marcus looked at the door. The door opened at 3:47 p.m. Nobody marked the time consciously, but later several people who had been in Sport Zone that afternoon would remember it with unusual precision, the way people remember the exact moment a storm arrives, not because they were watching for it, but because something in the air changed before it happened. The first thing anyone heard was the sound. Boots on the threshold strip a single step clean and deliberate. Then another, not fast, not slow. The pace of someone who had learned that urgency and speed were not the same thing, and that the most commanding way to enter any space was to enter it like you had always intended to be there. Heads turned. It moved through the store the way a sound wave moves through water, first the people nearest the entrance, then outward row by row until it reached the back of the gathering around AMAYA and Holt. Sergeant First Class Nicole Richardson walked into Sport Zone on a Saturday afternoon in her Army service uniform. She did not hurry. The uniform was immaculate, not the pressed and starched immaculate of a photograph, but the settled inhabited immaculate of someone whose relationship with that uniform had been forged over 14 years in conditions that tested every seam. On her left shoulder, the Ranger tab, golden letters on a black field, curved like a blade. On her chest, the silver star earned on a ridge outside Kandahar. The purple heart beside it, the one she had called a scratch, the one AMAYA had never believed. The combat infantryman badge above both. Below 7 additional rows of service ribbons, 8 rows total, a career in colored fabric. She was 41 years old and looked like what she was, a woman forged by something most people would never experience, emerged from it not hardened, but clarified. Her face was composed, not blank composed. Blank was the absence of feeling. Composed was feeling organized. She scanned the store in the first 2 seconds, locating threats, exits the positions of every relevant person. Her eyes found AMAYA in the 3rd second. She stopped moving. Across 15 feet of sporting goods, store floor mother and daughter looked at each other. The crowd between them had parted without being asked. AMAYA's face did something complicated. She had been holding herself together for the better part of an hour, through Holt's first smile, through the word laundry, through the voicemail, through the speech she hadn't planned to give. She had held all of it with both hands and not let it down, not once. But her mother was standing 15 feet away in a uniform that held 14 years of earned sacrifice on its chest, and AMAYA was 12 years old, and she had not seen her mother in 9 months. Her chin moved just once, a single involuntary tremor, and then stopped. Nicole crossed the distance in 8 steps. She came down to AMAYA's level, put both hands on her daughter's shoulders and looked at her face. You okay? Her voice was quiet. Just for AMAYA, the same voice from the 2 a.m. calls, steady present, stripped of everything unnecessary. AMAYA nodded. Once. Nicole held her daughter's gaze for 3 more seconds, reading whatever she needed to read. Then she straightened. She turned around. She looked at Officer Darren Holt. Holt had not moved, but the architecture of his posture had changed in ways he was probably not aware of. The crossed arms had come undone. His weight had shifted off his back foot. His chin was slightly lower. These were the small physical adjustments of a man whose body had processed information that his pride had not yet caught up to. He was looking at the uniform, reading it the way anyone with even partial military literacy would, moving across the rows of decoration with the dawning comprehension of someone doing arithmetic and not liking the total. The silver star, the purple heart, the combat infantryman badge, the Ranger tab. His eyes moved across each one and stopped and moved again. His expression went through several things in rapid succession: skepticism, recalibration, and then something that had no comfortable name, something that lived in the territory between shame and the refusal to fully inhabit shame. Nicole let him look. She stood perfectly still and let him read every row. She did not help him. She did not rush him. She understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand in front of someone and let reality do the work. Loretta Hayes, standing to AMAYA's left, had come to attention without consciously deciding to spine straight shoulders back. Old reflexes, permanent ones. Marcus looked at his phone. Current viewers 12,400. A notification: local journalist at Denise Parker, WGN, has shared your stream. Comments 847. His hand was completely steady. He kept recording. Nicole looked at the gathered crowd, the crossed arms, the recording phones. She looked at Loretta and acknowledged her posture with a brief nod. She looked at Jade and Tyler. She looked at Marcus and at the phone in his hand, held just slightly too still to be reading a text message. She looked last at AMAYA. Nicole reached out and touched her daughter's face, one hand briefly against her cheek. A gesture that lasted 2 seconds and communicated, in those 2 seconds, 9 months of distance and the specific weight of choosing over and over to go back. Then she dropped her hand. She turned back to Holt. And Sergeant First Class Nicole Richardson, 14 years of service, 3 combat deployments, Silver Star, Purple Heart Ranger tab, looked at Officer Darren Holt with the composed, unhurried attention of a woman who had faced far more frightening things than this moment, and said in a voice pitched for the room but not performing for it, "I understand you have some questions about my service." It was not a question. The silence that followed it was the loudest thing that had happened in Sports Zone all afternoon. Holt opened his mouth, then closed it. A small mechanical failure, the mouth beginning its habitual motion, and then stopping when the words that usually lived behind it failed to appear. He had been talking for the better part of an hour, with the easy fluency of a man accustomed to the weight of his own voice. He had talked because he believed the gradient was in his favor. The gradient was no longer in his favor. Nicole waited. She was not impatient. She had her own momentum, not the momentum of volume or position, but the momentum of someone who had earned at considerable personal cost the right to stand exactly where she was standing. She had all the time in the world. Holt exhaled slowly through his nose. He stopped, started again. "I made some assumptions that were," a pause in which he weighed several possible endings and found none adequate. "Incorrect." The word landed in the silence like a stone in still water. Nicole looked at him a moment longer. Then she spoke. "I'm going to tell you something," she said. "Not because you deserve to hear it, but because my daughter is standing behind me, and I want her to see how this is done." Holt was very still. "I enlisted at 22 years old," Nicole said. "I was told in my first week of basic training that women like me were a distraction and a liability." Those were his exact words. "Women like me." She let that phrase exist for a moment. "I went to Ranger School in 2014. I was one of 4 women in my assessment cycle. I was the only one who completed it. I ran every mile, climbed every mountain, crossed every swamp, went without sleep for the same hours as every man in that class. And I did not ask for different standards because I did not need different standards. I have been deployed to Afghanistan twice and Iraq once. I have lost soldiers I was responsible for. I have made decisions under fire that I will carry for the rest of my life. I have been shot," a brief pause, "and I came back." Her voice had not risen by a single decibel. "I came back because there are people at home who need me to come back." She did not gesture toward AMAYA. She did not need to. "I am not telling you this to impress you," Nicole continued. I am telling you this because you stood in front of my 12-year-old daughter and told her in front of a room full of people that her mother could not be who she said she was because of what we look like. My daughter has been defending my name since she was old enough to say it. She has been sleeping alone in an apartment on the south side of Chicago, crossing days off a calendar, waiting for me to come home for 9 months. And the one afternoon she comes out to buy me a gift. Nicole stopped. For just a fraction of a second, something moved across her face. Not anger, not grief. Something that was the compressed form of both. Then it was gone. You owe her an apology. Not me. Her. Holt turned slowly toward AMAYA. AMAYA was watching him with her mother's eyes steady, present, missing nothing. I'm sorry, Holt said. His voice had lost its shape. I made assumptions that were wrong. I should not have said what I said. AMAYA looked at him for a long moment. She did not say it's okay because it had not been okay. She did not say I forgive you because forgiveness was something she would decide about privately in her own time without an audience. She said what her grandmother Cora had taught her to say when an apology was real, but the wound was still present. Thank you, AMAYA said quietly, for saying that. It was not warm. It was not cold. It was honest, the most dignified possible response from a 12-year-old girl who had held a line for the better part of an hour and was not yet ready to stand down completely. Loretta made a sound barely audible somewhere between an exhale and a word. Jade had both hands over her mouth. Tyler was staring at the floor with the expression of someone who has just witnessed something he will be thinking about for years. Marcus looked at his phone. Current viewers 12,847. Comments 1,203. Shares 412. He lowered the phone slowly. Nicole had noticed him. She had noticed him several exchanges ago, the way she noticed everything. She met his eyes briefly with an expression that was not quite a question. Marcus turned the phone so she could see the screen. Nicole looked at the viewer count, at the shares, at the name at the top, at Denise Parker WGN. Something shifted in her expression. Not alarm, more like a soldier registering a change in terrain and adjusting accordingly. She looked at AMAYA. Baby, she said, we're going to be on the news. AMAYA blinked. Then for the first time since her mother had walked through the door for the first time in an hour, she laughed. A real laugh, short and surprised, the laugh of a 12-year-old who had forgotten for the past 60 minutes that she was still a 12-year-old. Nicole put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. She was still in full uniform, still carrying everything that uniform carried. But in that moment, standing in a sporting goods store on Michigan Avenue, with her daughter's shoulder under her arm, and Loretta Hayes at ease 3 feet away, and 2,000 strangers watching from their phones, she was simply a mother who had come home. Holt left quietly. No dramatic exit, no confrontation at the door. He simply moved toward the entrance with the diminished momentum of a man who had arrived certain and was leaving otherwise. Nobody stopped him. Nobody called after him. The crowd let him go the way crowds let go of things that have already been resolved without ceremony, because the final word had already been said by the evidence of a woman standing in the room. Loretta stopped Nicole on her way out 20 minutes later. The store had largely returned to its ambient Saturday rhythm, but the people who had been present had reorganized themselves in the subtle way witnesses reorganize after something significant, standing slightly differently, talking to people they hadn't spoken to before. Loretta stood in front of Nicole and they looked at each other with the recognition of people who share a particular language. Benning 2009, Loretta said. Nicole's expression open. Master Sergeant Hayes. Retired. Loretta extended her hand. Your daughter is extraordinary. Nicole shook it. She gets that from her grandmother. Loretta smiled. With respect, Sergeant, she gets it from you. Nicole looked at AMAYA, who was standing with Jade and Tyler near the shoe rack, holding a pair of gray and white New Balance trainers, explaining something to Tyler with animated hands. Alive. Unhurt. Intact. I have 46 hours left, Nicole said quietly, more to herself than to Loretta. Then I go back. Loretta nodded once. She understood that arithmetic completely. Then you'd better make them count, she said. That's the plan, Nicole said. On the way out, Nicole stopped at the shoe rack. She took the gray and white trainers from AMAYA's hands, looked at them, turned them over the same way AMAYA had, checking the sole, the construction, the weight. Good choice, she said. I know what you like, AMAYA said. Nicole put the shoes in the box and tucked it under her arm. At the register, she paid for them herself, $47 exactly in cash, because AMAYA had been saving for 6 weeks, and Nicole was not going to let that money be spent on anything other than what it had already become evidence of a 12-year-old girl who had crossed off every day on a calendar and had not stopped not once, not for anything. They walked out of Sports Zone together into the gray Chicago afternoon, mother and daughter boots and sneakers, uniform and hoodie, and the door closed behind them, and the street received them without ceremony. The way streets receive everyone, the way cities continue their enormous, indifferent motion around the small, specific moments that turn out to matter most. In the apartment on East 43rd Street, Cora Richardson was making dinner when they came through the door. She turned from the stove. She looked at her daughter in uniform. She looked at her granddaughter's face. She set down the wooden spoon, opened both arms, and did not say a single word because some things are too large for words, and Cora Richardson had always known the difference. The three of them stood in the kitchen for a long time. Outside, the city moved on. On thousands of phones, a video was being shared and reshared, accumulating comments and reactions, and the particular velocity of something that has struck a nerve in the way that true things do. By midnight, it would have 2 million views. By morning, 3. But in the kitchen on East 43rd Street, none of that existed yet. There was only the smell of Cora's cooking and the knock of the radiator and the window above the sink looking out onto the gray rooftops. And 46 hours, and a uniform with a Ranger tab on the shoulder, and a girl who had held the line. Just like she'd promised. And now before we go, I need to ask you something. When AMAYA stood in that store alone with no proof and no backup, and she looked at that officer and said, she has already proven everything every single day, what did you feel in that moment? Because I think most of us have stood somewhere like that at least once. Maybe not in a sporting goods store. Maybe not in uniform, but somewhere. In a meeting, in a classroom, in a family kitchen somewhere. A person looked at us and decided before we opened our mouths that we were not enough, that our story was not real, that the things we were proudest of were too large to belong to people who look like us. In that moment, you had a choice. You could look down and give them the confirmation they were waiting for, or you could find the fixed point above their left shoulder and refuse. AMAYA refused. Nicole had spent 14 years refusing in training pipelines not designed for her in units, not built around her, in countries where people were actively trying to end her life, in a world that kept asking her to prove what she had already proven 100 times over. And she went back, every time. Not because it was easy, because there were people at home counting the days. 46 hours. Think about that. You come home from 3 deployments, from mountains and heat and decisions that live in you permanently, and you have 46 hours. 46 hours to be a mother, a daughter, a person who laughs in a sporting goods store and pays $47 in cash for sneakers. And then you go back. What would you do with 46 hours? What would you say? What would you make sure the people you love knew before the door closed behind you again? I think about AMAYA crossing off that last square on the calendar. I think about Cora setting down her wooden spoon. I think about Loretta standing at attention by instinct because some things the body never forgets. I think about Marcus Webb, who pressed record when it would have been easier not to and held his phone pointed at the truth. Small acts, ordinary people, the specific courage of showing up and not looking away. That is what this story's about. Not the medals, though. The medals are real, and the cost of them is real. Not the viral moment, though. Justice moving at the speed of a live stream has its own particular satisfaction. It is about a 12-year-old girl who was handed a hard moment and refused to put it down until her mother walked through the door. It is about the people who stand beside you when they don't have to. It is about the ribbon placed in a child's hand at the end of 46 hours, so she has something solid to hold while she waits. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment. Tell me where you watched it from. Tell me what you would have said if you had been standing in that store. Tell me about the person in your life who holds the line when no one is watching, who crosses off the days and comes back. Those stories deserve to be told. And if you want to hear more of them, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, because this channel does not forget the people history overlooks. We will be here tomorrow with another story that matters.